All right, and welcome back to That's Some Cheese, part of the Vendetta Sports Podcast Network. Today is Monday, August 30th, 2021. And today, well, Courtney's always here. From now on, I guess. We're going to have Josh Taylor, Brian Tann's guy from Pittsburgh, join us in a couple minutes, but I want to get through the company stuff before he gets over here because I don't want to bore him with that. He's a busy guy. A couple things on my list here, Courtney. Chime in whenever.
Okay.
First of all, how are you doing today, Courtney? You're okay?
I'm sleepy, but I'm good.
Okay. First things first, had a big mass firing today. Absolute mass firing today. And it was well deserved. We had 3 interns not reply at all. Like, hey, can't reply. So 3 interns reply, and then 2 other people, I got an email from Slack saying they were inactive, which I looked it up. It means they had not read or sent a message in 14 days.
Sheesh.
I should never get that email that someone goes inactive for that long. So those other 2 people were also fired. So 5 total people fired today. And I want to specifically ask you this, Courtney, because I got a response from one of the people. Okay. And of course, one of the most absolutely delusional email responses of all time. So in the intern chat, where, be a good place to reply, I asked all of the interns, A, send me your start date. Doesn't seem too hard. B, introduce yourself to the rest of the group. Part of the intern experience is you should be making connections.
Right.
And C, fill out your timesheets and send them to Krieg's Corner. This kid did none of those things. And he was also listed as one of the inactive people. So he had not read or sent a message in 14 days. This kid had the audacity to send me an email that says, you obviously don't respect or appreciate communication skills.
Huh
is right. Right. Hilarious.
Okay.
Yeah. But hey, I'm the one that, couldn't get a start date out of the kid.
Right.
Couldn't get a timesheet out of the kid. Couldn't get him to introduce himself to the rest of the group, but I'm the problem. Love those people. By far, without question, the single worst this fall class, the worst intern group we've ever had. I sent the over-under for 7.5 people that make it through the semester. It's already below 7.
Dang, really? Sheesh. That's
worst
all
class
bad.
by far. I mean, this kid, AJ, the audacity to send me, oh, you don't appreciate respect and communication skills. Could you imagine not doing those things? Like, yeah, I'm in the right here. Couple more things. We had like 4 people this week not show up because they didn't know the time zones. I'm going to actually send a couple of those screenshots. If we can have those edited in, cross the kid's name off. You don't need to embarrass the kid. But my favorite response out of all the people that missed with the time zones was, here where I live in Iowa, it is Central Standard Time. My favorite. Yeah, here where I live, even though, both emails say Eastern Standard Time is when the interview is, it's just hilarious. So we need to edit those in somehow.
Okay.
2 more things. I don't know when he's here or if he's like on his way. Next, NFL head coach. We're going to put that on pause for now. We ended up winning the Super Bowl, 15-1 season. Not bad. We're going to pick up season 2 eventually to try to go for the 16-0 and Super Bowl winning season. But that's on pause for now. Next thing I'll be streaming is The Godfather.
Okay, Godfather.
So that will be happening tonight. Obviously, the episode won't be out by then. But tonight, 9 o'clock, we'll be streaming The Godfather. So that's going to be exciting.
Why The Godfather?
It's my favorite movie of all time. It just gets me going. The Italian roots in me, it feels good in my blood,
Gotcha. Cool. Okay. I never seen that movie, I'm going to be honest with you. Sorry. I've seen Goodfellas plenty of times.
I think what's going to be required here for the company trip in Vegas is I'm going to make all of you fuckers sit down and watch it. I think that's going to be on the required to-do list.
Okay. So then we watch it. We're going to talk about it.
I mean, I guess.
Like, what's the assignment here? Okay.
You just have to watch it.
All right.
Last thing on my list. I don't know when he's getting here. Big Unk merch. It is officially on, not sale, I guess. Well, technically it is on sale if you just use the promo code cheese. Mm-hmm. But if you're not smart enough to do that, then it's not really for sale, but you can buy it. Crop tops and tanks. It is on the website. I'll link it in the description for the post. Make sure to go, buy those, support the site. I'm going to be donating some of the profits to the person that runs the store. Her dog got into a knee injury, needs a little help. So I'm going to be sending some of it over there too. So support the dog, Max, and support the site.
Yep. Right. I remember that dog.
Yeah. You like the dog?
Mm-hmm. From Toast Time.
Yeah, my one and only appearance.
Hey. Listen.
You can speak. You can.
That was Anthony. No, you know what? I'm the producer. I'm gonna blame that stuff. Blame that on me. Be honest.
You don't. You're in the Emma Brown territory. You don't get any blame.
Okay.
Just like when AJ tried to that same kid who is delusional and doesn't understand how life works. That same kid that blamed Emma Brown for something, I blamed him. Just because anybody that blames Emma Brown for anything, it's automatically not Emma Brown's fault.
Gotcha.
You're in the same category.
Okay.
Courtney did X, Y, and Z wrong. Nope, their fault. Doesn't matter what
I'm feel bad because especially if it's really my fault.
Nope. Doesn't matter if it's your fault or not.
Okay.
So I do want to start with some like sports media questions because this show is mostly centered around the timeline of the company. We have a lot of incoming interns every semester, fall, spring, summer, whatever. What would you say is maybe like you're like just getting into the sports field, maybe like one or two things that these kids should know when they're first entering the sports media field?
Number one, try everything. Everything. Anything you can possibly do.
I agree with that.
The only reason why I really believe I have the career path that I do is because I decided to go back to school for broadcasting specifically. I had already graduated from college with a communications degree from Duquesne University and could not find the job I was looking for anywhere in media. So I started working in other places. And it started when one of my bosses at the health insurance company that I worked at was listening to a bunch of us talk about sports one day at work. And she stops me and she's like, "Why are you here?" And I couldn't answer her because I had to remind myself, like, wait a minute, how did I get here? And it made me freak out. And I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm going back to school. So I went back for my broadcasting degree. But when I went back, I said, you know what? I don't want to just do TV. I want to do radio. I want to write for the paper again because I had before. And in fairness, the first time I was in college, they didn't have like a broadcast journalism, path that was offered to you. You had a communications and media path, but it was mostly print. And then after I graduated, of course, you leave school and they bring the good stuff after you leave. So they added, a broadcasting track. So I went back for that. And when I did that, I said, I wanted to write, I wanted to do radio, I wanted to do TV. I did all three things. So when I graduated with my second bachelor's, I started looking everywhere. I looked at TV stations. I looked at radio stations. I looked at opportunities to write online. And since none of these things that were being presented to me were full time, I was kind of taking the freelance role of, all right, whatever you give me, I'm going to do it. So I had one opportunity where I was writing for a website here and not making a lot of money. Another opportunity where I was working at a TV station and not making a lot of money. And then working at a radio station, not making a lot of money. And it all kind of started to spill together into different opportunities. And eventually working at a TV station for a few years, I got hired by their sister station. I was at WTAE in Pittsburgh. That was the first station that ever hired me. I still consider it to be home. Their sister station in Fayetteville, Arkansas, KHBS hired me. 4029 News hired me out there. I was there for 2.5 years as a sports anchor. And even while I was out there, I started to dabble in radio a little bit. I was doing one of the ESPN stations out there and then later on the CBS sports station. So that was a really good experience too. Eventually, I said, you know what, I need to go back home. Some family situations have changed, and I said, I got to get back home where I'm needed. So I came back to Pittsburgh. And within 2 weeks of coming back to Pittsburgh, my old TV station called me and my old radio station called me. They both had jobs that were open, and I'm like, okay. But I took the radio job because I wanted a little bit of a change of pace. I wanted to have a little bit more freedom with my schedule. So I went with the radio job. And it was a great decision to make because not too long after that, KDKA, the CBS station in Pittsburgh, they come looking for me with an opportunity to do some more on-air work as a freelancer, as a freelance sports anchor. And I'm going, okay. So I went from having no jobs when I came back from Arkansas to having 2 of them in 6 months. So it just kind of snowballed from there. After that, old friend of mine that had done a lot of play-by-play for high school football games for not a lot of money goes, hey, I'm working at this new place. You want to come do high school football games with me for money? Sure. So I jump in and do that. Before I know it, 2014 turns into 2021, and I'm still doing TV with KDKA. Since jumped on with 93.7 The Fan, doing radio on weekends. Still doing high school sports, high school football play-by-play. Now doing college basketball play-by-play for my alma mater. And then I've been involved in co-writing 6 books. So it's been a really strange 7 years since I've been back here. But it's crazy where one decision where, I want to try everything turned into this huge path where I'm literally doing everything at the same time. So I could never really complain about how it's gone. But that's really the thing. Just try everything because you never know where it'll take you. And do your homework. Know what you're walking into. Know what places you're walking into when you apply. Know what markets you're walking into if you get hired there, because you never know what you need to know at a moment's notice. And they're going to expect you to know it when you walk in the door, because viewers don't know any different. They don't know how long you've been in that place. They don't know where you came from. They're expecting you to know what you're talking about when the time comes. So if those are the 2 pieces of advice I would give, those are it.
I totally agree with that. I think the most successful people here are the ones that can do a little bit of everything. Like Courtney's a perfect example. She edits audio. She runs the StreamYard account. She does social media accounts. She even writes blogs. She writes WNBA blogs.
Courtney is the greatest. That's why.
The greatest. The people that have been the most successful here are the ones that they dabble in a little bit of everything. And one of these days, somebody's going to call Courtney or whoever and say, hey, I saw you doing this. Well, I didn't know I was really that good at this specific thing. I thought it would be this thing. So you got to try a lot of everything, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you never know when someone will ask you, hey, tell us about your time doing this or tell us about your time doing that. I think that's what led to my first TV job, because I got hired as a weekend sports anchor in Market 101, and that was my first anchoring job. And for people who aren't familiar, it's hard to jump into a market that high. I mean, we're talking, a couple hundred, almost 300 different market sizes as far as the country goes. So when you're able to jump into somewhere like Fayetteville, Arkansas, which is right in the heart of SEC country, with no live TV experience, I had none, but I had live radio experience. And the news director that hired me, she said, one thing I was impressed with you was, you had been on the air before. So you know how to conduct yourself on the air because you've been there. And I said, can't argue with that, because who knew something else in my resume would lead to something that would create the opportunity I'm looking for. She said between that and my experience doing play-by-play, obviously I've done a lot of live broadcasting, so that helped kind of push me over the edge and maybe make up for some of the areas that I might have lacked on paper.
Yeah, I also want to go over that point you made about knowing the markets too, because every single intern interview, I ask the person, so why do you want to work for us? And it's amazing to me how little, oh, well, I just saw the application. Like how do these people not understand, maybe go over the website, read an article, look, it's amazing to me how many people apply for jobs or here specifically, and they're they don't know anything about the company. That to me is crazy.
Yeah, I had that advantage going for me, because when I ended up getting the job I had in Arkansas, I had already worked for Hearst for 3.5, almost 4 years. So I had a little bit of a background on how Hearst operated and how they operated other stations, everything they used in the newsroom, all the tech, all the different equipment, all the systems and everything. I knew all of it backwards and forwards because I was already familiar with it. So that's one thing I had in my pocket. The other thing was, I was so much of a rabid sports fan, and being able to not even, study up frequently as much as just knowing how much I had heard Arkansas in previous years. knowing about Nolan Richardson and 40 Minutes of Hell and that team in 94 that won the national championship, and then the one that made a good run the year after that, and then knowing about, Peyton Hillis and Darren McFadden and Felix Jones and that offense, that was just incredible. But, but those are the things that fans remember. When you get there, they expect you to know about the Wild Hogs offense. They expect you to know about 40 Minutes of Hell, even though it was, years ahead of time. And, you never know where that stuff takes you. And during my time there, I got to interview Nolan Richardson in his ranch, like in his house at his ranch in Fayetteville. Like, not thinking in a million years, the former head coach, who's a Hall of Famer, won a national championship, would invite me into his house to interview him. So you had to know what you're walking into. And then getting a chance to meet a guy like Scotty Thurman, who ended up being on the Razorbacks coaching staff at some point. And when I meet him, the first thing I say is like, yeah, I grew up with a Duke fan, and you broke my heart in 95. Or you broke my heart in 94. And he just starts laughing. So it's things
Those
like
things
that. Those things are really important because you never know when you get into a situation or a conversation with somebody and you're like, I don't know what to talk to this guy about because I have no idea who he is. And you cannot walk into a situation, especially if you're a reporter, unprepared. They'll smell it on you.
Mm-hmm.
I remember
it ruins your credibility.
I remember watching Darren McFadden. I was like, wow, his legs are really skinny. They might be skinnier than my legs.
Right. Man, but he was so ridiculously fast. So.
Yeah.
And the talent, I mean, those three running backs, like that Wild Hogs offense, McFadden, Peyton Hillis, Felix Jones, all three guys went to the NFL.
Yeah.
Like, what? Two of them were drafted in the first round. You're like, this is insane. I want to say McFadden.
I was hammering the table for Chris Johnson that year. Hammering the table for Chris Johnson.
Oh, and Felix Jones went to the Cowboys. And my best friend was a Cowboy fan, so he was so excited about Felix Jones. So, and I want to say Felix Jones later became a Steeler. But it just, when you see all that stuff kind of pile up and you hear different things over time. And I've been one of those people where, yes, of course I have my teams. I'm a Pittsburgh guy. Of course I follow the Pittsburgh teams. But I also pay attention to everything that's going on. I pay attention to college basketball as a whole. I pay attention to college football as a whole. I pay attention to NBA, NHL, MLB, NFL as a whole. Because, A, you don't know who your teams are going to face sometimes. So sometimes it's good to know who your teams are going up against. And B, you don't know who might end up on your team from another team. If someone gets traded, you would say, hey, I know a little bit about this guy. Or, if your team, gets a free agent that played somewhere else. I remember him from his years there when, this team faced them and things like that. You have to be well-versed. If you're trying to, take this in a very narrow point of view, you're going to miss some stuff. And the more you miss, the harder it is to try to regain that footing where you are compared to everybody else.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how many people that apply is like, I only watch this. I like the people that are really well-rounded. I'm a crack addict when it comes to college football, just because I'm in like this crazy fantasy league when we can actually draft incoming true freshmen.
Wow.
We get to keep them for their first 3 years when they come into the NFL. So I am all over college football.
Wow. I was so happy that college football games were on last Saturday. I'm like, this is the most wonderful time of the year.
Hammered UCLA this weekend.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I know a handful of Pitt fans that were watching that game specifically just to watch Todd Graham lose, because there are Pitt fans that are still bitter about how he came and left like a thief in the night. So, yeah, there were a few people that were excited about that. I was watching Illinois and
God, that Nebraska quarterback stinks.
God,
he is awful.
I don't know what was worse, the fact that Nebraska looked so bad or that they made Brett Bielema leading Illinois look good. So it was like, it was trying to figure out the lesser of two evils. And now I say this as a guy who was in Arkansas when they hired Brett Bielema. So I saw how that entire era went. And I was not
a great look for Scott Frost.
Oh, not a great look for Scott Frost at all.
No.
Not at all. And the Big Ten's got some questions to answer if things don't get better as far as some of these peripheral teams. We know what Penn State is. We know what Ohio State is. We know what Michigan is. We know what Wisconsin is. And we're starting to learn what Minnesota is under P.J. Fleck, because he's a pretty good coach. But some of these teams on the periphery, they're going to have some questions to answer if they don't figure it out.
I'm not sure they're better than Rutgers, Nebraska.
That's a conversation to be had. I'll leave it at that. I want to say Rutgers is favored going in to play Temple this week.
Yeah, they are by 14.
Shout out to Rutgers for being favored by double digits. It's a progression for them.
Yeah. I do want to ask you, because you said you went back to college to get more opportunities. I almost, and maybe this is different now, but part in my head, and maybe I shouldn't feel this way. Maybe this is really dumb, but in my head, I'm like, I don't know if I should have went to college. I feel like I should have gotten a head start on starting my own media company 5 years ago. Because I don't know how much I'm really going to even use my degree. Because there's a lot of kids, they go to school and like, hey, I got a degree from Northwestern. That's awesome. You're probably going to get a job. But I went to dog shit East Stroudsburg. I didn't learn a thing when I went to college.
Kidding. Okay.
I don't know if I'll ever use my college degree for anything. So I'm like, part of me goes, well, I didn't originally go to East Stroudsburg. I originally went to Ursinus for wrestling. Then I broke my back, and then that was it for that. But I finished at East Stroudsburg. I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever use my college degree. I think I wasted my time.
It's weird because, as hell-bent as I was on going back to get my degree because I knew what I needed it for, I ended up becoming really good friends and colleagues with the guy who did not go to college. He was a lot like you, Trey, and I think if you would have done what you're thinking about, you'd probably be on the same wavelength that he is. It's a guy named Matt Fargo. I want to say he's just coming up on maybe turning 30, but he's one of the most brilliant people that I've met in this industry. This kid started out at 14 years old announcing high school sports games, just high school football and basketball. Whenever he can get himself in the arena to do a broadcast for, he was doing this at 14. And when I met him, I want to say he was probably 17 or 18. We worked together actually in the same place. And he's like, hey, I'm doing high school football and basketball games. You should come do some with me. I started my own network and everything. I'm like, what? It was to the point where when we first started doing games, I would have to pick him up and drive him to the broadcast. He didn't even have a driver's license yet. And this is a kid that over half a decade built up just this outstanding resume of all these things that he had ever done and just got more opportunities and more opportunities to the point where he's in his mid-20s and gets a job as the announcer for the Harlem Globetrotters.
That's why I'm in my late 20s, but yeah. I sort of feel that way. Like, why did I go to college? I should have started this 5 years ago.
Yeah, this is a guy who he did this, and it turned into an opportunity with the Globetrotters. That blew up huge for him, and then he, at one point, ended up moving back to Pittsburgh because he had some issues with his family and wanted to be back home to help his mom. And so he moves back to Pittsburgh and starts a network for one of the local high schools, and was running that for a while. But he just had this incredible resume, and all of it probably does not happen if he does the usual what's the word I'm looking for? Just, I don't want to call it the normal route, but the conventional route, and goes to college and spends all this time and probably working all these jobs that pay him no money and trying to get internship credits and stuff. And he just went and did it as a teenager. And now he's in his late 20s and kind of, I don't want to say he's calling his own shot, but he has this amazing career that he has already. And a lot of it probably would have been avoided if he had done it the way I did.
Yeah, I originally got my start because my dad sent me an application to a fantasy football company. He's like, hey, they're looking for writers, apply. And I sent him like a sample thing, and they hired me. And then another company hired me from seeing what I did there. And then another company hired me from what I'm seeing there. And then I eventually started my own thing. But it was like, God, I wasted all that time. I should have did this when I was younger, 15, 16.
I always thought about doing that. They're like, oh, you should start your own thing. I'm like, no, I don't have that much patience. I would be the worst boss ever.
It's
at least as far as that goes. Working for me would not go well.
It's a struggle,
regard, at least, especially when I was younger. Like, granted, I'm nearly 40 now, so it's
we have like 50 people I manage every day.
Whew, you're braver than me. Now, considering the fact that I'm nearly 40, I think about it now. I'm like, man, I probably should have just kind of. I'm
not saying it's for every career. Like, I originally went to school for economics because I wanted to work into a baseball or football front office. And I did. I worked for a company called Sports Info Solutions for a while, and I probably wouldn't have got that job if I didn't go to college. I probably wouldn't have gotten that job. But for the most part, I don't know how much I'll use my college degree.
I'm lucky. I didn't think I ever would until maybe 7-8 years ago. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm on to something here. When this job in Arkansas happened, I don't. Even then, it was like, all right, I had this opportunity, and it's great. I think it was when I started at KDK in 2015. It was April of 2015. It was my first day on air. Now, granted, when you've already done the job for a couple of years, it's work after a while. You get in and everything just starts firing again. You get back to what you're used to doing. But it was different for me because now I'm on a station in my hometown that people have been watching for years and decades and generations. and it's one of the bigger stations in the market, and my face shows up, and everybody I know is like, "Hey, I know that guy," and it changes everything. And it didn't really set in for me until maybe a couple minutes after that first show was over, because I had my cell phone in my pocket while I'm on the air, and thankfully I was smart to turn my phone on silent, because if I hadn't, it would have ruined the debut. Because I had people left and right, messages, phone calls, text messages, Facebook, Twitter, and I'm like, I open my phone when I get back to my desk, and I'm like, oh my God. It never really occurred to me just how big it would be. It was big for me. I can't downplay that. But I didn't realize how big it would be for everybody that I knew and everybody around me. And, my family had a watch party at my mom's house. And they're like, my wife sends me a video of everybody freaking out the moment my face showed up on the screen. It didn't occur to me until then. And then afterwards, I'm thinking about it going, okay, maybe you did the right thing. Maybe this is working out the way you wanted it to. It took me a while to really accept that I actually made the right decision. But when you finally get that confirmation, it does a lot for you.
I got 2 more sports media things, and then we'll go over some maybe NFL or college stuff.
Let's do it.
How do you view like the mainstream Skip Baylesses of the world, the Colin Cowherds of the world? Like, do you see them as like, oh, they don't really bother me? Or do you see them as, why are they on the air? This is embarrassing.
I need to choose my words carefully, because I'm a radio host myself, and I get looked at for some of the things that I say from time to time. But my thing is, and I tend to remind people, I'm like, hey, if you're right, tell people you're right. Make sure you remind them every chance you get, because they're going to kill you when you're wrong, and they never let you forget about it.
I do that all the time to this day with Mitch Trubisky, and I won't let it go.
Oh, I'm beating my chest here for the last month or so, because I'm the one guy who said, hey, what if the Pirates take Henry Davis? And everybody's like, oh, I got that part right. And this past week too, I had a discussion, or I should say 2 Sundays ago. One of my friends who's a beat writer for the Pirates, we're talking about Gregory Polanco. He's like, yeah, we know how the story ends. He's probably going to be gone soon. 3 days later, he gets put on outright waivers. And we're like,
DFA'd. Dunzo.
Yeah, like imagine that. So like this past week, I'm like, hey, we warned you. So heed the warning has become like my new resident hashtag here. I'm like, I'm giving you guys free wisdom here. I'm giving you free game, and you keep ignoring it. So I'll beat you over the head with it if I have to. But to answer your question, I feel like there are people who move the needle properly. If there's a way to describe that. What bothers me is when you have people who aren't as well versed in certain things and just speaking on certain things. I'll give you an example. I was watching a clip from Pardon the Interruption, and they asked Tony Kornheiser a question about the Rays sweeping Boston and what this meant for the Red Sox, what this meant for the Rays.
It was like 2 weeks ago or something, right?
So it was like a few weeks back.
Yeah.
And he went on this, I want to say 5 or 6 minute rant, or however long it was. Maybe it was a few minutes. The messed up part about all of it was he didn't mention a single item or a single fact about the Red Sox. He didn't mention a single factor item or player for the Rays. It was everything else on the periphery that did not matter. He talked about all kinds of stuff, not about, hey, the Rays, by the way, have put together a pretty good pitching staff, and they don't really do it the conventional way with their starting pitching and using openers. Or, hey, they've got a really good offense that, believe it or not, score more runs than people think they do in the American League. None of that. Not even about how Boston started this year so great and how better than people expected, and maybe how they might have fallen back to earth. None of it. It was everything else but. And I'm sitting there going, I just gave up 2 to 3 minutes of my life to listen to this. Like, and if you're a Boston or Tampa fan, I don't know how they weren't losing their minds. I'm a guy who covers the Pittsburgh teams. I'm like, now I know what Boston and Tampa are doing. I know what's going on in that division with the Yankees making the resurgence they are right now. I'm sitting there going, I'm trying to figure out what's going to happen in this division, and this is what you throw at me? It's insane. And it just, stuff like that is tired for me. Yeah. I think there was a time, maybe even 10 years ago, maybe even closer to 20 years ago, when the space that was occupied by people who knew their stuff, who paid attention to what was going on, who had their finger on the pulse of what was happening. But most importantly, they knew how to communicate it well and do it in an engaging fashion that people paid attention to. And I don't know where that changed. I don't know why it stopped. I don't know who was put in charge and let that happen. But somewhere along the line, it just went from people who were informed and knew what they were talking about and had everything stacked up to people now who can just make the most noise in the quickest amount of time and get the most attention.
Yeah.
And that bothers me because I'm more of a Will McAvoy type. You know, if you think about that opening scene from The Newsroom on HBO, when he kind of goes on that rant, when he's on that panel, when somebody asks him, is America the greatest country in the world? He says, you know, we used to be informed by men who were revered, by men who were informed. And in this case, you know, we need to be probably more informed by men and women who are informed, men and women who are revered, because they know what they're talking about, because they do the homework, because they've been the boots on the ground at some point, or they know the people who are the boots on the ground at some point, or they've made the right relationships, or they've just done the things necessary to know exactly what they're getting into and what they're talking about. But here's the thing. You can know everything you're talking about to beat the band, but if you can't communicate it well, if you can't be engaging, if you can't do it in a way that people find interesting and compelling and entertaining for that slot of space that you have or whatever space that you're given, you're really wasting everyone's time. And I've always felt, and now granted, I don't feel like I've met that mark in my own mind yet, but I always find myself wanting to be the guy. Can I be engaging? Can I be compelling? Can I be entertaining while knowing what I'm talking about at the same time? And if the answer is no, then I need to figure out what I need to work on in order to get there. And I always have stuff to work on. I always have things that I can be better at. I can always do better research. I can always work on my timing and how fast I talk. I'm from Pittsburgh. We don't talk fast. But I can always work on those things and try to make myself better with everything involved. So when that time comes to be in that certain space, I can go in, do what I got to do, say what I got to say. And for me, the biggest compliment I get is when I meet people who are like, man, you really know what you're talking about. And my answer is, thank you so much. I appreciate you listening, or I appreciate you watching, because that's the thing I want. I want people to look at me and be like, that guy knows what he's talking about. Not just that guy makes a bunch of noise and says a bunch of stuff and half of it is crap.
I'm with you, especially when Stephen A. Smith talks about the Ohtani comments, for an example, or when it was before the NFL draft. He's like, well, Dwayne Haskins, he's more of a runner than a thrower. Like, to me, those are the things that are like, bother me, not acceptable, can't have it.
And if you've watched any kind of Urban Meyer offense, you know that's not true. I mean, yeah, he has athletic quarterbacks, but they're going to have to be able to throw a football. And
Dwayne Haskins is not that.
Right. It's just I don't understand. And this is what happens when you get trapped into certain norms or into certain stereotypes or into certain things that you hear people say, and you hear one person say the wrong thing, and you start to believe it's true. And I got into some of my radio show in the past month. I'm like, stop listening to people who aren't telling you anything useful. Stop listening to people who are telling you the same washed up stuff from 12 years ago. Stop listening to people who heard someone else say one thing or got one concept in their mind and didn't want to confirm or verify it. They just took it and ran with it with no real evidence. Stop that. Listen to people who know what they're talking about. And I'm starting to become that pushback guy. It's just like, you know what? I'm more Tribe Called Quest. F what you heard, act like you know. It's a lot different for me because I grew up in a time frame where we had people that were informed, where, you know, I was the guy that watched the sports reporters on Sunday morning. Those guys were informed. Those guys knew what they were talking about, because not only because they kept it to specific stuff that they were versed in, but they delivered it in a way that made you understand it and made you realize that, hey, maybe I don't understand all of this. Let me hear what this guy says to be better clarified on it. And that kind of gets lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, ESPN's not like they used to be. I think I saw something a couple weeks ago. They're thinking about dropping out of the New York radio market because WFAN's kicking their ass. It's like, how is that possible? I think people know.
Well, that's great news as an Odyssey guy. So there's that. I work for an Odyssey station, so you never complain when you hear.
I find that crazy. You can't compete with WFAN.
It's strange. I find it in not even just with ESPN. There is a line that people walk sometimes now, and I think it's just the way the industry's gone. There are some times when people have to decide, are you going to lean toward content or are you going to lean toward making money? And sometimes the ones that lean toward making money, those are the ones that tend to make the decisions that they are maybe a little bit off course because they're more concerned with, hey, sponsors are hearing this, or this is getting towards, this demographic, and that might be more financially suitable for us, as opposed to letting your talent and letting your content speak for you and letting your audience tell you how good it is and then letting everything else come along with it. I think we've gotten so far past that now because, you hear the phrase, he who has the gold makes the rules. But in this particular business, that's not always the case. You can be the guy that has all the gold and really have the worst product. And sometimes I think that's where the ESPNs of the world maybe lose course a little bit. And I say that as a guy who at one point wanted to work in Bristol in my younger years. But, and this is nothing against anybody there because there are some people there that I still revere, that I still look up to and see as mentors. But, you have to be able to walk that line of, are you doing and saying the right things as opposed to, are you just in it to try to secure the next bag? Because when you get too caught up in that, people start to tell the difference. And I think you can even almost plot the point, maybe in the timeline, so to speak, if you want to use MCU terms, when those paths started to diverge. I think you can really see the difference there. You can probably go back and just look year by year as to how the talent and content changed. You say, okay, that's when everything got different because this person showed up or this show came or this format came and everything snowballed from there.
One last thing on the sports media stuff. We have a lot of interns that come in, and I try to preach this from the beginning. Guys, you got to make friends. You never know 5 years down the line who's going to be famous and who's, going to be at this spot or at this job or whatever. Can you just maybe reiterate or go over like maybe some of the connections that helped you along the way? Because some of these interns, they'll go like 4 weeks down the line and I'm the only one they speak to. It's like, you gotta, maybe reach out to a couple people.
Just personal relationships, man. Yeah. Relationships are what make any business, successful, or any person in any business successful. I'm lucky because I feel like I fell into some of the relationships that I had, working at WTAE. I got to work with guys like Guy Junker, who was one of the longest tenured guys in this market. And then getting to work with somebody like Bill Hillgrove, who started out at WTAE and later on became the voice of Pitt football and Pitt basketball and the Steelers, and got to do some field producing and stuff working with him. And it's like, and the crazy part about it was me being the producer and having Bill Hillgrove, the voice of the Steelers, the voice of Pitt football, say, hey, you tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. And I'm like, I'm giving Bill Hillgrove instructions. This is crazy. And I listened to him for years. You build relationships like that and you get to work with people like that and you remember stuff like that because it just helps you realize, A, it helps you appreciate where you've gotten to, but B, it helps you remember, hey, you're going to be that point where you're that guy bringing the young people behind you and you got to tell them how it works. You got to show them how to do it. You got to remind them what the guys that came before you showed you. So it's really important in that regard. And then in some aspects, I get to work with some of the younger guys in other areas. Like, for instance, I had an opportunity with a radio station in town where they had a contest, kind of similar to the ESPN anchoring contest of those previous years, where you come in and you try to audition and get that ESPN contract. I had a chance to do that with one of the radio stations here. And I did the same contest 2 years in a row, and both years I came in second place. And the guys I lost to that won, I ended up working with both guys down the road in different areas. The one guy I went and worked with at another radio station, we ended up working together. And then the other one, we do a lot of TV work together because he's one of the guys we bring in for our TV station as a panelist a lot. So we do a lot of work together. And it's just one of those things where, it's partially the American Idol kind of concept, but also, when you're going into this, everybody's going through that gate together. Sooner or later, you're going to cross paths at another time. And it's been really cool to have guys that I worked with previously or in our younger years, we're all kind of competing for the same jobs. Now we're working together, we're getting to collaborate, and we're having a lot of fun doing it. It's really cool, especially when it's guys you have history with. Another guy who was part of that contest, he was one of the top finalists along with me, and he ended up becoming the PA announcer for Duquesne men's basketball and Duquesne athletics altogether. So I started doing play-by-play for men's and women's basketball. He's the PA announcer, and it's like, hey, that's my buddy Dom across the way. And it was another one of those things. It's like, who knew that we would cross paths and become colleagues at one point? And then we worked at the same radio station together also. It was just one of those things where if you build those relationships, they can turn into mutually beneficial things for your career down the road. As I tell that story, that last example, my buddy Don Marico, who I worked with at Duquesne, passed away this past year from COVID-19. And it's another one of those things where that whole relationship, that whole story comes full circle because he was a guy that everybody that worked with loved him. And I'm thankful that I had that opportunity to be in that contest with him and to get to know him and work with him at a couple different outlets, because that became a really important relationship in my career and also my personal life. And I miss him every day. But it's one of those things where relationships can be so beneficial to your career if you cultivate them properly.
Let's go over the juicy stuff, some NFL college stuff. We appreciate Josh Taylor joining the show. Make sure to follow him on Twitter. It is Josh Taylor HD, I believe. This should be right. We'll have Sophie edit that on the screen. What kind of football fan would you describe yourself? Like me personally, I love my fantasy team more than I actually love my own team. And I'm super passionate about the NFL draft. Like I can watch the combine all day, no matter what.
I am a guy that if I wasn't doing something related to football for a living, I'd probably be in front of the TV consuming it at a ridiculous and unhealthy rate.
Oh yeah.
I'm lucky because my current work schedule when football comes around, Friday nights I'm either calling a high school football game or I'm working at the TV station reading highlights for a bunch of high school football games. Saturday I'm probably anchoring. On Saturday night I'm probably anchoring and doing highlights for Pitt, Penn State, and West Virginia. It's really awesome. Sundays, I'm probably either talking about whatever game is coming up Sunday for the Steelers on the radio. I'm also recapping college football from the night before. And if I'm lucky enough to work on Sunday night, I'm probably talking about whatever game happened or whatever games happened in the NFL. So the fact that my work schedule is tailored around football, it makes fall so much more fun for me because I'm like, you know what? If I wasn't doing this here for a paycheck, I'd probably be doing it at home. So you might as well do it for a paycheck. It makes it more fun. I have like 2 or 3 fantasy football teams, which is really insane because, you know, if I wasn't working, I'd probably pay them the proper attention and maybe I'd be better at it. But I'm one of those guys that probably work so much that I should be better at fantasy football, and I'm not. I tend to lose more often than I win. I'll put it that way. But at the same time, I'm one of those people. It's just you put the content in front of me, I'm going to sit there and consume it for hours on end. And Friday, Saturday, Sunday, when it comes to football, my wife will tell you, she's like, he's doing it again. Here we go. But it's something that's been ingrained in me for some time now, and I can't imagine life without it.
I'm a crazy person when it comes to fantasy. In my fantasy league, we're allowed to draft college guys and keep them, and we only do auction leagues. No snake drafts.
Wow. You know what? I think snake drafts are kind of
soft.
Yeah, I feel like if you're a guy in the middle, because if you have the first pick or the last pick, you're in good shape. If you're a guy in the middle, like it tends to hurt. It tends to hurt you a little bit.
I think it's so elementary. Yeah, I hate them.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I feel like, you know, if you have like just the straight drafts, I think it's a lot better that way. I just think it's a better strategy because now you're forced to pay attention to what's going on around you, and you can't try to I'll snatch these 2 picks. No. You got to be ready to go. You got to have a strategy in place and how you want to put it together. And it separates the men from the boys, so to speak. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah. I want to actually start with my team because I think we'll create the most maybe controversy there. I am not like a fanboy of the Ravens. I would almost call myself like a hater of the Ravens. I hate my own team currently. I hate them. Right now, I am absolutely furious at the fact that John Harbaugh played J.K. Dobbins in the last preseason game. Drives me insane why a running back that averaged 6 yards a carry as a rookie needs to be playing in the preseason game against Washington. And the Ravens have won 20 preseason games in a row, and it means nothing.
Well, let me thank John Harbaugh on behalf of Pittsburgh fans.
Yeah.
They're not glad to hear J.K. Dobbins got hurt, but they're also glad to hear J.K. Dobbins got hurt, if that makes sense. Because if you're talking about one of the things that the Steelers have to worry about the most, dealing with the Ravens coming into this season, it was going to be what they're going to do about J.K. Dobbins, and now that's one less thing to worry about. I hear this so much when they talk about the Ravens preseason win streak, and I'm going, why does that matter? Why is that important? It's not. It's important if you're a degenerate enough gambler to bet on every preseason game. Then it's important to you. But, you know, from the standpoint of just understanding why the regular season holds so much weight and so much merit, I say this as a guy who hosts a call-in show a couple nights a week on TV, and people are asking me, I don't understand why Ben Roethlisberger didn't play in the preseason game. I'm sitting there going, Because it's the final preseason game, and he's 39 years old. And he has a regular season to play. He's got 17 regular season games to worry about,
and hopefully the playoffs,
and hopefully 3 or 4 more. That there's bigger fish to fry now than worrying about the preseason. Preseason games don't count. The records do not matter. It's bad. I have to go and research, previous preseason records because they're not that readily available. I had to go, and it took me like 20 minutes to find out that the last time the Steelers had an undefeated preseason was 1997 under Bill Cowher. It's like, I would have never known that if I wouldn't have it came down to Googling like Steelers undefeated preseason. That's kind of how I found it, but I was trying every avenue possible to try to track this down, and I could not find it. That's how insignificant the preseason is. If you want to know certain information, it's hard to track down because no one really cares at the end of the day.
I remember every single year when the Peyton Manning Colts were coming, they lost every game. At literally every game.
Forgive me while I'm wiping my nose, but I'm getting over a cold.
You're good. I hate my own team. And John Harbaugh today going up to the media like, well, we didn't really play him that much. He only played 26 snaps. It's like, it's 26 too many. And you cut Mark Ingram this year. You don't have another running back on the roster to be throwing him out there.
When I hear people talk about, they're only going to play this much, I remind them, remember Kajana Carter? Remember how that worked out? It doesn't take that long. It takes one snap. It takes one play to go wrong. And it all falls
especially at running back. Like, maybe I get
right.
I'm not even going to defend it, but like, maybe it's a pass rusher. Like, hey, I want to try out a couple pass rushing moves I worked on this summer. Fine. Go right ahead. But this is a running back. Running backs don't need extra carries.
And he's already your starter. You already know what he's going to do. He already knows the offense. He doesn't need to figure out anything extra.
Same offensive coordinator.
Yeah, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. I don't understand it either. And when they said it happened in the first drive of the game, I'm going, it's your last preseason game. Why is your starting running back playing?
Well, they got to win another preseason game. That's why.
Oh, wow. This is also the same team that Gatorade dunked their coach after a regular season win. So, and I called him out for that too. I called him out for it when it happened.
I hate him.
And I got family in Baltimore like, well, it's important because they beat the Steelers. It's a regular season game. You don't Gatorade dunk your coach in a regular season game. Maybe they set themselves up for this. I don't know. We just became friends because you hate that.
I think we became friends when I said Matt Canada helping out Nathan Peterman get drafted.
This is true. True. You dropped that on me, and I'm like, this is a man who knows.
I watched spring ball religiously. When I saw Nate Peterman and Josh Dobbs at Tennessee, I'm like, wow, this guy stinks. And he transferred to Pitt, and I'm like, he really stinks. And this is a goofy offense. Like, I don't know how this guy even gets picked.
Matt Canada got that kid picked, man.
Yeah.
And
he was not close to Josh Dobbs at Tennessee, and Josh Dobbs is not a world beater.
No, it's insane because, and it's funny how that all comes full circle, right? Mm-hmm. Because the guy he played with at Tennessee is now playing under Matt Canada's offense with the Steelers. It's nuts. I have had to tell Steeler fans, Trey, over and over again, we don't know what's going to happen with this offense. And I'm like, it's Matt Canada. Matt Canada had Pitt scoring 40 points a game. And trust me, if you guys aren't familiar with Pitt football, Pitt scoring 40 points a game is unheard of. It's unthought of. The thought of that team being a top 10 scoring offense in the country, they dropped 76 points on Syracuse during that season. I'll add this too. It wasn't just because they could. Part of it was because they had to, because Syracuse scored like 65, but that's beside the point. But it's like, this is an offense that can pretty much score at will. If Matt Canada is not that team's offensive coordinator, they don't beat Penn State in 2016.
They don't beat Clemson.
They don't beat Clemson on the road. They scored 40 on the road at Death Valley. That was Matt Canada's offense. I have to keep reminding people. Remember when I'm sitting there going, remember 42-39 Pitt fans? Remember when they beat Clemson? That was Matt Canada. That was the guy that did it. That's the guy that helped you pull that off. Remember that stuff. That's important. And they look at me like, well, I'm like, oh. This is the importance of understanding how everything works and paying attention to everything. So that way you can make those parallels and make those connections when the time comes. So, and Trey, you're talking to somebody who was predicting Matt Canada taking over that offense this time a year ago. I said a year ago, Matt Canada is going to be offense coordinator next season.
Their offense was kind of stale last year.
And Randy Fichtner was running it. I'm like, you don't hire this guy to just be a quarterback's coach. You don't hire a guy who did this with Pitt's offense and has all this experience and did what he did at Maryland to just be a quarterback's coach. You bring that guy in because he's going to design your offense in the future. I said this a year ago, and people are looking at me going, how did you know that? I'm like, because it just makes sense. You don't make Matt Canada a position coach. You have that guy, Taylor.
More innovative for sure.
Exactly. And there's another thing. I'm going to toss this out there because I've tossed this out there before too. I told people this a year ago too. You don't hire Terrell Austin to be a position coach. He's going to be your eventual defensive coordinator with the Steelers.
So you're not a Keith Butler guy.
Well, it's not that I'm not a Keith Butler guy because I like working with Keith Butler. I've interviewed him. He's a great guy. He's a great human being. But and fans in Pittsburgh are ready to run him out on the rail. Like, don't get it twisted. But I've been saying this too. You don't hire a guy like Terrell Austin with that resume to be a position coach. He's already been a defensive coordinator in the league. He's going to be one again eventually. He'll probably be a head coach someday. You bring that guy in to be
secondary guy too.
He's a good secondary guy. Yeah. Now, granted, he's their secondary coach now, but he's going to be a defensive coordinator at some point with this organization. They brought Keith Butler back for a year. I keep telling people there's a reason behind that. Just watch. And they're like, I'm like, just remember who told you first. So I'll be ready to take that lap in the year when that happens too. So we'll see what happens.
I want to ask you one more Ravens question because I know we're going to disagree on this.
Okay.
But I will take what Joe Flacco gave me every single day over whatever Lamar Jackson gives me for the rest of his career. I don't believe Lamar Jackson will ever win a Super Bowl, and I don't necessarily like giving people credit because but I feel like I have to. Ryan Russillo recently compared Lamar Jackson to Rudy Gobert, and I feel like it's kind of accurate. We can talk about Rudy Gobert's plus minus during the regular season, and 100%. All the Jazz fans in the world can say, well, look at how he changes the floor in the defensive end and look at his plus minus and look at all the things that he does. But come playoff time, we see what happens to Rudy Gobert. He's chasing guys around the corners and he can't really affect the game and he looks out of place and he doesn't really fit. And then the Jazz lose in the playoffs again. And then
that's a good comparison.
I had to give him credit for it because
has some good ones.
I think it's 100% accurate. We can look at the Ravens, and they're, for the most part, they're a really good organization. If you're a really good organization, you're going to find a way to win regular season games. And they can run the football, and they can control possession, and for the most part, they can play defense. But come playoff time, inaccurate throwers of the football don't win playoff games. And he's had 4 playoff games, and they've all been disastrous. And the last playoff game he played against Buffalo, Tyler Huntley was better. And I don't care what anybody says. Tyler Huntley was better in that playoff game. I will take what Joe Flacco gave me every single day of the week over what Lamar Jackson will ever give this team.
Man, first of all, I was a huge SVP and Russillo fan. I was a huge fan of that show. That was one of the things that they had swung and just hit it out of the park on. And when that show busted up, I was very devastated because I loved listening to it as often as I could. And that's an amazing analogy. I actually agree with you. As much as I love Lamar Jackson as a physical specimen, as impressed as I was with what he did at Louisville, with a coach in Bobby Petrino, no less. Bobby Petrino's offense usually is not tailored to a guy like Lamar Jackson. But they took him and they took what he had as far as his talent, and they made him a Heisman Trophy winner. He was legit Heisman Trophy winner. He earned that trophy.
More legit of a Heisman Trophy winner than an MVP. Russell Wilson should have won that MVP award.
I would totally agree with that. That's fair. Because the MVP, the truth of the matter is, the MVP is also a reflection of how your team does, not just how you do as an individual.
Yep.
Which is why Aaron Rodgers won it. People are like, well, Aaron Rodgers. I'm like, he threw 49 touchdowns and 6 picks. And they went to the NFC Championship game. And if he doesn't do what he did, they don't get there. I don't care what you're telling me.
They probably went 6 games with Jordan Love.
I don't care what he says in a press conference. I don't care how many fans he makes angry. They're not there without him last year. They're not there.
They're a third-place team without him.
Exactly. To your point, if you take Lamar Jackson away from the Bengals, do they fall off as much? And my answer is no. The offense in previous years without Joe Flacco, would it have fallen off? Absolutely, because of Joe Flacco's arm strength and his arm ability. And Pittsburgh fans joked about it for years. He chucks it down the field, they either catch it or get a penalty. Yeah, but you know what? It got results. It worked. You can't argue with something that works. They won a Super Bowl doing that. And you can make the argument of, okay, well, if that delay doesn't happen in New Orleans, maybe they don't beat the 49ers. Well, maybe, but still, you got to call it what it is. And
I've always compared him to Eli Manning. I think Billy Cundiff actually and Lee Evans screwed him out of a second Super Bowl. I think the year they had Gary Kubiak, they should have beaten the Patriots that year. I've always compared him to Eli. But I actually think Eli Manning cared about football. I don't think Joe Flacco cared about football. I think Joe Flacco cared about his paycheck. But they got come playoff time, Lamar Jackson will never do that.
You want to talk about a team that gave New England fits in Foxborough in the playoffs? It was Baltimore under Joe Flacco.
If Justin Tucker was the kicker instead of Billy Cundiff, they beat them.
I don't disagree. Baltimore would give New England all they could handle in Foxborough in the playoffs. Few teams could make that distinction, but Baltimore was one of them, and Joe Flacco had something to do with that. So I actually agree with you.
One of the greatest playoff runs ever that year they won.
I totally agree with you. You and I actually agree on this, and I'm one of those people that gave Joe Flacco a lot more respect than a lot of Pittsburgh fans did. And my thing was, you give Joe Flacco time and an open guy, it's over. And that's why I respected a lot of those Steelers.
He's also a little bit of a Pittsburgh guy, a little bit.
I mean, he played at Pitt before they decided to. Oh gosh, it's
a little bit of a Pittsburgh guy.
Yeah, Tyler Palko was the guy that they chose over him to start at Pitt. So we could get into Pitt decisions that they made over the years.
I actually think the Pickett kid's not terrible.
I am higher on Kenny Pickett than a lot of people in this city are. Believe it or not.
I don't think he's terrible.
I think Kenny Pickett is a really good dual threat quarterback. Is he Heisman caliber? No. Would he be the number one pick in the draft? No. Would he hold a candle to Trevor Lawrence? No. But
I'm not sure he's a third round pick, but
he's probably not even a third round pick. But does he
can play?
He can play. He can do a lot of the basic things well. He can do a lot of things well. Does he maybe excel at any one of them over another? No, probably not. Maybe that's more of a damnation than it is a positive for him. But can he do some things that help this team win games? Yeah. Absolutely. And not to mention the fact he's tough as hell. This kid, he will play hurt.
I think it was a Notre Dame game. He took a hit and he dropped the ball right in the bucket. I think it was a Notre Dame game. I forget.
He's a very mentally tough kid. He does not rattle with a lot of stuff, and I think he handles adversity really, really well. I was there at Heinz Field when he beat Miami at home. When they won that game against Miami, I think Miami's ranked number 2, and it was their last game of the season, and Kenny Pickett and Pitt beat them, and I don't think they win that game without Kenny Pickett.
I'm having fun.
Yeah, this is my kind of carrying on, man. I could do this all day.
Your guy, Brian Tan, he was not happy with the Najee Harris pick. He was not happy with the Najee Harris pick. My personal belief is I know Najee Harris is going to be a baller. He was the number 2 recruit in the country for a reason. The guy's unbelievably talented. Just the way he hurdles guys. They don't make guys like that. My question is, I know Tomlin's going to run him into the ground. Can he be a back that, and I think the answer is probably yes. Can he be a back that he's in a Steeler uniform for 7 years and he's getting the full workload? Because I know Tomlin's going to run him into the ground.
Yes, I think he is. I think he's built to be. I think he's more built to be than Le'Veon Bell was. I think that's part of the problem. I think the biggest issues when Le'Veon Bell happened when he wasn't healthy, when he wasn't 100%, and you saw some of that, that byproduct start to carry over time. And I think Najee Harris is a guy he has the potential to have a better career path in Pittsburgh than Le'Veon Bell did. He has that kind of potential. He has that kind of talent. He has that kind of track record. And I had to kind of pause and step back and hear so many people in Pittsburgh saying, I wouldn't have taken him in the first round. I'm sitting there going, you wouldn't have taken Alabama's leading rusher in the first round?
And he's clearly more talented than an Eddie Lacy. He's clearly more talented than a Trent Richardson. He can catch the ball, and just the way he moves is pretty impressive. I wouldn't say he's Henry, but
he's not Derrick Henry. But who is Derrick Henry? How many Derrick Henrys are there?
I think if my comp for him coming into the draft, if Derrick Henry and Mark Ingram had a baby, he'd be Najee Harris.
I think it's a good way to describe it. And I don't expect Najee Harris to be Derrick Henry. I don't think he needs to be.
No.
But my thing is, how are you going to argue with the all-time leading rusher at Alabama, who also was tied as the all-time touchdown leader in the SEC in this conference's history? Not like the Pac-12, not the American. Is the tied for the all-time touchdowns lead in the SEC. This is the conference that's cranking out the national champion 3 years out of 4. And he's tied for the most touchdowns all time in that league. And you're questioning that guy. What? I had a good 12-minute rant on people questioning the Najee Harris pick. I'm like, how many Alabama games did you really really watch.
But not even that. You don't have to watch the games this year. You could watch the games from 2 years ago when he was a true freshman. He was like, that guy's better than Josh Jacobs. It's not close. That's why he's
really
on the field.
wasn't close. I mean, you look at some of the stuff this kid did on the field. I'm going, people are questioning this? It was insane to me. And I bring this back around to, and I can't blame Brian for this, because there are a lot of people who do what I do who don't always know what I know. Not that I'm saying I'm the smartest guy in the world. But I have the sense to look at things and hear what other people say, hear what coaches say about him, hear what opposing coaches say about him. Pay attention to some of this stuff that people are saying about players and what his teammates said about him. It's just what the Steelers coaches said about him during the recruiting process and the draft process.
Great person, too.
Yes, the stuff that they fell in love with about this kid. This kid spent his draft night. He was not at the draft. He was not at home with family. He was not at some party. He was at a homeless shelter passing out meals and spent his draft day there. That's the kind of guy this kid is. And he shows up in Pittsburgh and immediately shows up in Pittsburgh, and he's doing stuff in the Pittsburgh community almost the day he gets there. Within a week, he's around in the community doing stuff. I'm like, this is the guy you want. And I'm telling people, as much as people in Pittsburgh wanted to get back to, let's get back to the smash mouth football and hard-nosed defense and guys that care about each other. That's the guy you got. You got that guy. He's here, and you're questioning it.
Which is a huge part.
You want. It's insane. This is the guy you've been begging for pretty much since Sherrod Dennis left, and you got him back here. And he's everything you want, and you don't appreciate him because you would have drafted someone else in the first round. What planet am I on? I get into this a good once a week, Trey. I swear I get into this once a week.
That's one of the things I wish I had access to at the Combine, because you never truly know what kind of person they are most of the time. Like, I wish I had access to those Combine interviews. Like, I still lose sleep at night because Charles Rogers sucked in the NFL. I'm like, that guy was awesome. How did he suck? He was an idiot. How did Vernon Golston fail in the NFL? It still drives me nuts. He's lazy. He didn't really kind of get it. But Najee Harris, you know what you're getting. He's a good dude.
Oh, yeah.
And that's almost the problem with Leonard Fournette. He's unbelievably talented. He shows up to the Combine at 240. Well, we should have known that was coming.
Yeah, there's guys you know quickly who get it, and then there's guys you discover who don't.
Yeah.
Najee Harris is one of the guys that gets it, and I don't think people really realize it yet. I think they'll appreciate it more with time, and the more they get to see him around this area, I think the more they'll appreciate him, and he'll turn some heads, no doubt.
I do understand the argument of, we shouldn't take a running back in the first round either. Like, I do understand that, but I do think with certain players, like, I was banging the table for Chris Johnson. Yes. McCaffrey, got to pick that guy. I don't care. Najee Harris, I had no problem taking that guy in the 20s. He's the number 2 recruit in the country.
I don't have a problem taking that guy in the 20s because of his pedigree and his track record and his overall physical ability. There's always going to be, an argument to make it against whether you should do this or whether you should do that. But there's sometimes,
especially in this draft too. I thought this draft's running back class. It wasn't like last year. You're getting Dobbins at 55. Okay, Cam Akers like 2 picks before. Okay,
right. But every once in a while, a guy comes along that's just this much higher above everybody else. He's head and shoulders above, and he is the exception more than he is the rule. And in the running back class, Najee Harris was that guy. But there was an argument I heard about against drafting a running back in the first round that I thought made no sense, because they're going, you shouldn't draft a running back in the first round because the position's been devalued over the years. I'm sitting there going, so if you draft a running back in the first round, then that means you value the position, right? So maybe you're trying to change the trend that you're citing in the first place? I hold that argument to be as stupid as the argument for keeping the DH in the National League because
even get me started.
Here's the reasoning I hear. Because of the double switch. Let me get this straight. You want to keep pitchers hitting because of a rule that keeps pitchers from hitting.
Yeah,
what?
That's the number. Like, don't even talk to me about rule changes until that one gets fixed. Like that. That's my.
I call things arguments like that. I call the death of logic, because you're making an argument just to say you can make an argument. So the devaluation of the running back position is the reason why you don't make a decision that probably puts value on the position.
No, I will say I wouldn't have taken Travis Etienne in the first round. I don't think he's good enough.
I would agree with that too, because Etienne, as talented as he is, he's not Najee Harris.
Not close.
Simple. Any other running back in the first round, I'm probably telling you you're crazy. But that guy in the first round, That guy made sense.
I want to ask you this. I actually have. I don't know how much you follow Texas A&M, but I have Isaiah Spiller on my fantasy team. I think he's damn good too.
I don't know much about him. I know about one of the guys that blocked for the run game last year, and Dan Moore Jr., who is a Steeler now. Yeah. And the more I hear about him, the more I discover that they like him. And he may take over the left tackle starting job before this season's over. Chuks Okorafor is a starter right now, and I don't think people are really impressed with him, but people are starting to become more and more impressed with Dan Moore. And Dan Moore said something after he was drafted that I thought was great. He told this story about how when Texas A&M would call run plays, the offensive line would get excited because they wanted to run the football. They wanted to be physical. They wanted. I think
their running back's good. Texas A&M's I was actually disappointed that they were ranked 6th because I think they're my sleeper team, which doesn't really count because they're ranked 6th. But I think they're going to be awesome. I actually think they have an upgrade at quarterback this year with Haynes King too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what happens there because not just because of what happens with that particular offense and that unit, but now you got Texas in town too coming in a couple of years. So that's going to be interesting.
I think they're going to kick the snot out of Texas.
I'd love to see it happen because I was one of those people that one of my favorite things about college football is the rivalry games. So when you lose a Texas and an A&M, which has been one of the biggest rivalries in college football for decades, and now you get it back and you still keep Red River. I'm loving that kind of thing. I'm loving that kind of stuff. This is good now. This is one of those you're Mr. Birds looking at Smithers and saying excellent because this is what makes you happy as a football.
I actually find that crazy too because Lincoln Riley has been hammering recruiting. I'm not sure anybody's been killing recruiting more than him. Now that he's in the SEC, how much is he going to dominate recruiting?
It's good.
They've been landing everybody.
I'm trying to figure out, and we don't know how the divisions are going to shake out yet. I'm trying to figure out how you navigate an SEC West that has Alabama, LSU, and Oklahoma. Forget everybody else. Forget my own beloved Razorbacks who are currently in the SEC West. I'm not going to say anything against them, but take them out of the equation. Your division has Alabama, LSU, and Oklahoma. Good luck. That's all.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Not even how you recruit against them, because that's going to be crazy too. You try to be one of these other teams recruiting against those 3 schools in your division, have fun with that. But even worse, when you get on the field, have at it.
I've actually always had a take on Le'Veon Bell, just so I don't forget this one. I want to hear your opinion on it. If he's not drafted by the Steelers, I don't think he's nearly as good.
I agree with that.
I think Mike Tomlin totally changed his body. Like, for people that watched him at Michigan State, he was like a 250-pound running back that wasn't really that quick.
Yes.
And I hammered the table. I was like, how are you guys thinking that he's better than Gio Bernard? Like, Gio Bernard's way better than him. And then Le'Veon Bell turns into this. I'm like, oh, I look dumb.
One of my mentors here in Pittsburgh, John Steigerwald, I got to work with him in radio for a while when I started out. He famously said back during Le'Veon Bell's rookie season that Eddie Lacy was better. And I
don't think Le'Veon Bell's nearly as good if Mike Tomlin doesn't change his body.
Absolutely. And what the Steelers did with Le'Veon Bell, what they saw for him in the career path that he went on, it was fantastic. It was legendary. And John Steigerwald to this day still gets hammered for saying that Eddie Lacy was better than Le'Veon Bell. And he stands by it. He goes, at the time I said that Eddie Lacy was better, but Le'Veon Bell put the kind of career together that he did.
So much of that stuff is where you get picked too.
True.
Like, I still believe to this day, if Josh Allen gets picked by the Jets, and I was a huge Josh Allen guy. I love Josh Allen. I remember watching him against Iowa. They lost 24-3. And I was like, he's way better than I thought, even though they got hammered. And I would draft him no problem.
That's what happens when you're Wyoming facing Iowa, basically.
If he would have gotten picked by the Jets, I still believe to this day he would suck. And I love Josh Allen coming out of the draft.
I feel that way about guys like Joey Harrington getting drafted to the Lions. I'm like, any other organization, he probably has a better career. David Carr with the Texans. If David Carr goes to any other team but Houston, he probably has a better career.
So a lot of that stuff has to do with that too.
Yeah, all of that comes into play. I'm one of those people that's like, I'll ask a lot of what if questions. What if this guy would have ended up here and this guy that ended up here?
I'm still doing it with Sam Darnold.
I'm still doing it with Dan Marino. It's been almost 40 years since Dan Marino was drafted. What if the Steelers draft Dan Marino instead of Gabriel Rivera? Does Dan Marino go to a Super Bowl and win one? It's It's one of those things that you kick around, man. It's one of those things that's worth asking. I think sometimes where you get picked does, I won't say it dictates it, but it plays a role in the outcome. I totally agree with that.
Man, I don't like all these people. And this is also going to sound ridiculous, but I'm like, you guys do realize that Mahomes is not Mahomes without the Chiefs and Andy Reid and all these guys.
Oh God, no. The only other team
he was a mess.
He
was a mess at Texas Tech. A mess.
And I think part of that was just because where he was playing.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Patrick Mahomes has amazing physical, natural talent.
His dad was a pitcher. We knew he could throw the hell out of the ball, but he had the arm.
But I don't think he was really playing in an offense that suited his strengths, and I think that showed. I think the only other team that he goes to outside of Kansas City and he has success is if he's going to Arizona under Cliff Kingsbury.
Fair.
That's it. That's the only comparable career check taking off the way it does because, of course, Cliff Kingsbury running the kind of system that Patrick Mahomes can thrive in. But you're right. Him getting teamed up with Andy Reid, you couldn't write that story any better.
I just don't think those people like, oh, well, look at what happened to him. Well, you got to factor in where you got picked, too.
And I'll throw a little nugget into this one, too. You're talking about him going to Kansas City, playing under Andy Reid in an offense that was already starting to use wrinkles and concepts that they borrowed from, wait for it, Matt Canada's offense at Pitt. You couldn't write that story better, how everything fell into place with Patrick Mahomes ending up at Kansas City running the offense that they did.
I can't stress enough how much of a mess that guy was at Texas Tech. His talent, there's no question.
I think that's fair. I think it's a fair assessment. I think a lot of people saw him coming out and saw the arm strength and were like, okay, the natural ability, he could be really good, but where does he end up? But you're right.
That's why I listed him as a wild card. I was like, I had Watson 1, I had Mahomes 2, but I was like, I don't really know what's going to happen here because he's a mess.
I had one guy who listened to my radio show religiously, and he was like, I want the Steelers to draft Patrick Mahomes. And I'm like, I see the argument. I don't think it's possible.
I saw the argument.
But I see the argument. And every time I see him do something ridiculous, I send him a message. I'm like, dude, you were right. Like, dude, you were totally right about Mahomes. I give him just every chance I get, give him his props for it because he nailed it. And anywhere else, I don't know if he's as successful. I mean, there's only 2 or 3 coaches he could probably be as successful with. You get him with Sean McVay in LA, I would listen. I'd listen for a little bit. I don't know if it would be as good.
I think Stafford's going to be it. This is going to be Kevin Garnett leaving the Timberwolves.
Yeah, he's going to light it up in LA. Mahomes in LA though, I think he lights it up, but at the degree he's doing in Kansas City and making a Super Bowl or a couple Super Bowls and a couple conference championship games on top of that, I don't know if that path is as well cut out in LA. But yeah, I agree with that.
I made the argument last year. You probably will disagree with this too, but actually, I think I'm batting 1,000 right now.
Yeah, we see eye to eye more than I think we gave ourselves.
I think we're batting 1,000 right now. I made this argument that if Andy Reid finds a way to win maybe 2 or 3 more Super Bowls with Mahomes, that I think he's got a case to be better than Belichick all time. Just the way he's, and I know this sounds crazy and ridiculous, but the things that he was able to do with AJ, he got a 2nd-round pick for AJ Feely. That guy sucks. He took Michael Vick straight out of jail, and he's making the playoffs. Jeff Garcia, Kevin Cobb. He had nobody. Imagine if he had like a franchise quarterback this entire time. The Philadelphia Eagles made conference championship game. I think Donovan McNabb sucked.
I don't disagree with the supporting points to the argument, but I'll counter with this. With everything Andy Reid did right, those teams had a lot of holes too.
Oh, yeah.
The things that they did right.
And he was in charge of personnel a couple of those years, and he did not nail the draft at all.
You see where I'm going with this, because as much as he did with McNabb, how many reliable receivers did he really have? How many really good dominant running backs did they have? How good?
Just Westbrook.
Just Westbrook. And because they had no other real receivers, they went Westbrook into the ground.
Oh, it was screen pass. We
talk about Mike Tomlin and what he did with Le'Veon Bell and Willie Parker, what he's probably going to do with Najee Harris. He might have did worse with Westbrook in Philly. And as good as Brian Dawkins was, and as good as some of those linemen were, and as good as Jeremiah Trotter was, how dominant was that defense really in Philly? How consistently good were they really over time?
Overrated, but solid defense.
They were solid, but if you put together even somewhat of a more consistently, if you put a caliber of defense like the Steelers had in Philly, Andy Reid wins more than goes more into 4 championship games and loses more than losing.
I've always thought that Donovan McNabb actually sucked, though. Like, really, really wasn't good. Like the first year he got traded to Washington, I think he was only like 32, 33. He should have had more in the tank. He went to Shanahan. I think it was Shanahan.
Oh.
I could be wrong about that. And
I think,
like
right.
Shanahan's a good coach. Like, you should not fail under Shanahan. And he was awful with the Redskins. Awful.
I thought Donovan McNabb performed above what people expected him to in Philadelphia, and I thought Andy Reid had.
Oh, yeah.
The only reason why I won't agree, well, actually, the other reason why, because I brought the personnel question into mind. The other reason why I won't say I wouldn't put him above what Belichick did was because Belichick has done what he did with Brady over 2 decades.
Long period of time.
Consistency,
but I think he can do this with Mahomes.
I think he could with Mahomes, but you got to remember, Belichick had Brady. They climbed their way up, got to the top quickly, then had to stay on top for a while, then had to tear things back down, and then work their way back up and then stay there again. They went through the cycle twice.
I'm not hating on Belichick at all. I just think Andy Reid is unbelievable and never gets credit.
I'm one of those guys. I'm an Andy Reid guy too. I think Andy Reid's a phenomenal coach. But in order to be put in the same sentence or be put above Belichick, you got to do what Belichick did. And he went through that cycle of building up, become a championship team, stay on top, win, 3 and 4 years, tear back down, get back up there and dominate again for another stretch of time.
He's like one of the only coaches that actually beats Belichick too, consistently. Yeah. Him and Harbaugh.
He's one of the few. Everybody has a foil.
Yeah.
Everybody has one. I mean, Nick Saban, you can argue that Dabo is Nick Saban's foil. But everybody has a foil, and Belichick's is probably Andy Reid. But in everything what we say with that, I'm one of those people that believes that, you're only as good as what your resume says. I subscribe to the outcast theory. You only funky as your last cut. So, with all that said, we can talk about Andy Reid and what he's done, but can you do what Belichick's done? That's hard to do. That's really hard to do. And that's hard to do in any sport, much less the NFL. It's really difficult.
I'll defend all the Parcells disciples. I think they're unbelievable. Even Sean Payton, I think he's going to turn around Winston. I think the Saints are going to be better than people think.
Sean Payton, and there are people who bag on Sean Payton. And they're like, Sean Payton. That's
wild to me.
Sean Payton's only that good because of Drew Brees. And I'm like, slow down there.
Oh, Drew Brees had nothing left last year.
And my thing is, I'm like, if Drew Brees has anything left in the tank, Sean Payton probably takes that team further. And of course, people come down on him because of everything that happened and the scandal there. And I understand all that. But that was on the defensive side of the ball. Sean Payton still put together a really good organization and a really good roster.
I think they're going to be a lot better than people think.
I think so, too. I think Jameis in that offense, I think they'll be really, really
I can't wait.
I'm looking forward to the NFC South being interesting again. I'll say that much.
I think Carolina's going to be better than people think, too.
That's why I'm saying that, because Sam Darnold being in Carolina, running that offense, I think they'll be better than people give them credit for. The NFC South is going to be
I'm a big believer in Matt Rule, too. I think he's shown that he has a track record. He tears things down. The first year he was at Temple, sucked. Next year, 10 wins. Goes to Baylor, suck. Next year, 10 wins. Like, turn around Baylor's hard. That team was in the literal dumpster.
I was one of those people that thought that maybe Matt Rule got an opportunity a little bit too early. I thought there were other guys in line that probably should have got a shot. But you can't argue with what he's done. You can't argue with his resume. And you're right. He has the ability to take things and shape them into what they should be. And
like, to me, it was no surprise they sucked last year.
Right, because you expect a team that kind of turnover. When you lose your guy that was your franchise for so long, and then you lose your coach, and you're bringing another guy in, and you don't know who your quarterback is yet, you're going to have issues. But have they found their guy in Sam Darnold? I'm not 100% certain about that yet. I do like the early returns, though, and I like what Matt Rule is capable of doing because he's done it a couple times before.
I think he knows both sides of the ball, too. He does.
He does.
He was a linebacker at Albright, actually, and most people think he's an offensive guy.
Yeah, when you can do what you've done at Temple,
yeah,
and then flip that into what he's done at Baylor, you're doing something right. I'll give him credit for that.
Baylor was garbage, too. They were coming off the Art Briles stuff, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and this isn't the first time a Baylor program was toxic. Let's not kid ourselves, because Baylor basketball was
they had Oklahoma beat.
Right. And this was a Baylor team under Art Browse that I saw play at West Virginia. I saw that Baylor team up close. And, what Art Browse had built at Baylor was really, really impressive. They got a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback out of that Baylor program. That's how high they had risen to see how far they had fallen. So, yeah, that was a big undertaking. And I thought he did really, really well with it.
All right, a couple more things, and we've gone too long anyway.
We always go too long.
I'm having fun now.
Especially Courtney. That's why I say Courtney's the greatest, because she's so patient.
Oh, she's great. She's got a hell of a future on her. I don't know why people don't call me every day to try to steal her. Doesn't make sense to me.
It's coming. That's natural. Enjoy it while you can.
Probably. I do think the Cleveland Browns are going to run away with this AFC North here. I think they're so loaded. I think they have too much talent on their team to not win this division. And I'm actually lower on Baker Mayfield than a lot of people. I just don't think he has the pure physical Josh Allen ceiling to where, like, oh my God, they're winning the Super Bowl. But they had a Clowney. They had a Josh Johnson in the secondary. They already have guys like Nick. I think Nick Chubb's one of the most underrated running backs.
So good.
I say this all the time.
I loved him at Georgia.
I still think he's better than Barkley. I don't care what anybody thinks. I still think he's better than Saquon Barkley. And people looked at me funny for 2 years about that. Because I know what he did at Georgia, and there's no doubt he was better than Todd Gurley at Georgia.
I think Saquon is so physically gifted, but you have to see the results on the field to match it. And that might be
he's got too much Reggie Bush in him. That's what I've always said about Barkley. He tries to hit the home run. He constantly has these negative 3-yard runs. It's like, stop, take the 7-yard gain. It's right there.
Yeah, I think that could be Saquon's downfall, or the thing that holds him back from being as great as he probably could be.
He's too much Reggie Bush in him.
But I loved what Nick Chubb did at Georgia. I loved what he did at Georgia. I am a guy that actually likes Baker Mayfield. I have family in Cleveland. I told them this a year ago. I'm like, you guys are going to think I'm crazy. I actually like Baker. They're looking, their eyes got all wide. I'm like, I'm a guy that respects Baker Mayfield. But the reason why I liked Cleveland, of all teams, taking Baker Mayfield, because of what's in here. He walks in with an attitude of, I don't care who you are, I'm going to beat you today. And if any organization in any sport needed that kind of attitude changeover, it was Cleveland. That guy shows up with a capable roster, and all he has to tell that roster is, we're going to go win this game today. And if they believe enough that they can, they will. They can go and beat anybody, if for no other reason than the talent that they already have is that because that guy says, oh, we're winning this game, and we'll do whatever it takes to do it. And even if he has to give a limb out there to win it. Those kind of quarterbacks, regardless of talent, sometimes those quarterbacks with that attitude alone, they can win games because of that kind of intangible.
I didn't necessarily hate him coming out, but I just didn't see how he could be the number one pick in a draft. I didn't think he was nearly good enough to be that.
I didn't think he was number one talent, but I think people knew with the results that he had at Oklahoma, with some of the intangibles that I talked about, I think people saw that and go, okay, maybe he can make this work in Cleveland. I was one of the guys that's going, if I'm Cleveland, I'm taking him number one simply because of some of those intangibles, because you can win games with them. And I agree with you. I think they could run away with this division. It's so hard to say it's going to happen because I thought the Ravens were in a position to make some noise in this division, and then J.K. Dobbins went down. And I don't know what they're going to do without a running game. I don't see how Baltimore can move without a running game. I
actually think Gus Edwards can play, but he's not Dobbins.
Right. I thought being able to run the ball with Dobbins and play action moving down the field, I thought that's how Baltimore was going to get it done.
I think he's sick, Dobbins.
Was that?
I think Dobbins is sick. Like, awesome.
I wanted Dobbins to be a Steeler.
They don't talk about this enough with the Ravens. They did not leave the Eastern time zone last year. They had every scheduling break in the world. They traveled the least amount of miles of any team in the NFL. They had the cupcake of cupcake schedules last year, and Jackson's numbers went down. I think a crash is coming.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And when that pick came, and the Steelers took Chase Claypool instead of J.K. Dobbins, I understood why they took Chase Claypool, but I wanted them to take J.K. Dobbins. That's how I felt at the time. And
I feel like I got to bring this up too. When Claypool was coming out of the draft, I hammered the table. This guy's got to play tight end. Now, obviously, he's not playing tight end with the Steelers, but I kept hammering the table. This guy's a tight end. You got to put him at tight end. He's better. He's a better version of Evan Engram. He's going to kill people over the middle of the field. Now, they didn't use him that way, but I saw him as the best tight end of the draft that last year.
He's going to get a lot of touches in Matt Canada's offense, both catching the ball and running some jet sweeps, and I think he'll be really, really good with it. So that is one we disagree on. Bringing this back around to Cleveland, like you originally asked me, I think they're capable of running away with the division as long as there's a guy in Pittsburgh wearing number 7 that has at least a capable offensive line in front of him and the defense is playing the way it is. They're always going to stand in the way. Whether or not they're successful standing in the way this time around, I'm not so sure. But I feel like Cleveland.
I think Pittsburgh's better than Baltimore.
I think Pittsburgh's better than Baltimore now. I definitely think they're better now, but without question now. I thought that it was a coin flip before we got there. Before we got to J.K. Dobbins getting hurt, I thought they would probably split those 2 games. But then again, in any given year, I expect Pittsburgh and Baltimore to split those 2 games because you just don't know what kind of tone game they're going to play. You just don't know, because here's one thing you do know that's going to happen. They're going to kill each other. The 2 teams will kill each other. That is the one guaranteed outcome. But who wins? You never really know. And honestly,
this hasn't been talked about with the Ravens. They lost Matt Judon and Yannick Ngakoue in the same offseason, and they have no pass rushers.
Yeah,
it's going to be a problem.
That's a hard thing to do when you lose both of those guys at the same time. I can't argue with that. And I think that only helps Cleveland. I think the fact that the Steelers have issues at corner as far as depth, I think that only helps Cleveland because Cleveland has the best receiver core in the division.
If Odell is actually Odell.
If Odell is healthy, and honestly, even if he's 60% of Odell, 100% Odell, 100% Odell Beckham is pretty damn talented. 60 to 65% of Odell when he doesn't have to be the main guy, that's not a problem. I mean, that's not a problem for me because Jarvis Landry is purely capable, and Jarvis Landry is a hell of a tough receiver. You're talking to a guy who covered a team that had to face both of those guys in the same time at LSU. I saw those guys play against Arkansas, and if who was their quarterback? Zach Mettenberg doesn't blow out his knee against Arkansas, LSU probably destroys Arkansas in that game.
I remember him.
Mettenberger tore his ACL, and Arkansas had a chance to actually do something in that game. But they couldn't do anything with Odell or Landry at the same time. And I want to say that Jeremy Hill was in the backfield on that team. That was a loaded LSU offense. But those 2 guys together.
Les Miles, he could recruit his ass off. He just wasn't very good at the coaching part.
Man, I thought Les Miles probably should have had a much better result.
Yeah.
Early career Les Miles at LSU lit the place up, but the latter part of it, I thought he just could not meet up with it. If you take that career trajectory and flip it around, we probably have a better opinion of him because it's like it's better over time and it goes upward. But he started out so well and had so much success early and couldn't sustain it over time.
My dad's a big Georgia fan. I'm actually a little concerned that Kirby Smart is low key Les Miles. I don't want to say it yet. He hasn't had enough. He hasn't had enough time, but he recruits his ass off. It's just doesn't quite get over the hump.
That's scary. That's scary for Georgia.
I'm a little worried that he's on that path. I don't want to say it yet, but
that's scary. And because Georgia, I think, as far as the SEC,
they're loaded.
They're. I mean, and not to mention the fact that the East wasn't what it was 10 years ago, or I should say 15 years ago, when you had to deal with Urban Meyer and Fulmer, and you had so much more depth on that side of the division, and it's not.
He had Justin Fields,
right? And well, there's that. You might be onto something there. I didn't think about that. So now you blew my mind with that one. Oh, if he becomes Les Miles at Georgia,
I'm a little concerned. It's happening.
Then again, if he's Les Miles at Georgia, that means he wins one. Maybe getting the one. Maybe they forget the rest of it. But if that's
their third running back right now is Dalvin Cook's brother. He's awesome. He doesn't see the field. Like they're loaded. They got guys everywhere.
See, you're gonna have me watching Georgia games now with an extra emphasis on what happens because that thought, that scares me. That scares me before if I'm a Georgia fan. That's you got my attention with that one.
Okay.
You piqued my curiosity. I got to pay more attention to that now because that's good.
Give me like
Brad's wedding. Wait till Brad's wedding.
Oh, we're gonna have a blast.
My wife's gonna be like, "Who the hell is this guy you're talking to? And why won't you shut up?" And I'm gonna be like,
I'll be there. I'll make sure to be there.
That's gonna be a time, dude. We're gonna have a lot to talk about.
Yes, we will.
Absolutely.
I'll make sure to shave the beard so I'm a little bit, more well groomed. But
hey, you do what you got to do, man. I don't judge beards. I wish I could grow one. I'm stuck with like the TV baby face because I can't grow a beard.
I got the Sicilian blood in me. It comes out like in 2 days.
I got the Sidney Crosby playoff beard. It just grows up in patches, and it looks more like ivy than it does facial hair. It's terrible. Absolutely.
Give
terrible.
me like 1 or 2 college football things you're like looking forward to, and then we'll wrap up.
Oh God. College football things I'm looking forward to. That's a good question. Keep an eye on what happens with Ohio State, Minnesota on Thursday. I'm a PJ Fleck guy. I'm not saying Minnesota beats Ohio State, but PJ Fleck has been known to make some games really, really interesting. I'm looking forward to that one. I will also say
I think CJ Stroud's pretty good. I mean, you never truly know, but I think he looked really good in the Elite 11 camps and all that.
Yes, and I'm really disappointed. My guy in Baltimore, now that you're not big on, came from Minnesota. I want to throw that out there too. That kid at receiver, man.
I don't think he was a first round pick. I said the same thing about Brandon Ayuk. I understand, sure,
I don't disagree
can play.
there.
I don't think he's a first round talent.
I don't disagree that. I don't think he's a first round talent either. But he's
especially the Ravens draft. How do you trade Orlando Brown? Is like, oh, we're gonna move up into the first round. Great. We took a guy out of Penn State with 0 career sacks. Oh way. It's like, did you have to trade Orlando Brown for that?
And you replaced him with Al Villanueva. Good luck. Let me tell you, Pittsburgh fans don't miss him. Here's one.
They drive me nuts. Eric,
you know what made Al Villanueva a Pro Bowler?
He's 6'8".
One afternoon in Chicago, and it had nothing to do with what happened during the game. If you know, you know. Let that one marinate. One afternoon in Chicago. That had nothing to do with on the field is the reason why Al Villanueva became a Pro Bowler. I'll stand by that till the day I die. I might have my wife put it on my.
It helps that he's 6'8".
Does help that he's 6'8", but for some people, it helped a lot more that he was an Army Ranger.
Yeah,
that's where I am on that one. So
yeah.
Oh, you need another college football thing for me.
Yeah, I need at least one more college football thing.
The Empire Strikes Back. Alabama's not done. Saban's got more in the tank. And that's despite losing Mac Jones. That's despite everything that's happening. Alabama's not going away quietly. The Empire will strike back because Saban knows how to reload. So just prepare for it because it's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Bryce Young should be pretty good.
I consider Nick Saban to be a Sith Lord. I have this theory that in just about every sport, there's a Sith Lord and there's an apprentice. In football, Belichick's the Sith Lord and Saban's the apprentice. Just remember that.
I do think Clemson has a shot to beat him. I think the DJ Uiagalelei kid's very, very special.
Yes, and everyone has a foil. Saban's foil is Dabo. I have Uiagalelei on my fantasy team coming up here soon. I love it. Now, I'll say this much too. As far as here's another one I'll toss in there. The ACC better put an electric fence around Clemson. They better put an electric fence.
Yeah.
They better put ring on the doorbell. They better get 4 or 5 dogs because if they better hope that Clemson does not start looking to other places. Because if Texas and Oklahoma could join the SEC, what the hell does Clemson need to do to stay in the ACC?
Why? Oh, I totally agree. I was looking at their conference the other day. I'm like, I think Boston College might be like second or third.
Now, there was a time 5 years ago when the ACC was Clemson, it was Louisville, it was Florida State.
Oh, Florida State's a mess.
But 5 years ago, and then Bobby Petrino left Louisville, and Lamar Jackson left, and Jimbo Fisher left Florida State. So
Miami should be better than what they are, too.
Miami should be better than what they are. Virginia Tech is the one team in the Coastal. I'm still going, okay, Virginia Tech still is what it is. And that's even with the transition to Justin Fuente, and I think they'll be back. And now, granted, that's considered the fact that Duke has a coach that I highly respect.
Oh, yeah.
Highly respect the head coach that Duke has.
But it's Duke. You're only getting so far.
It's Duke. You're only getting so far. And for some odd reason, and I've been saying this as a guy who's been covering Pitt for a while, the ACC Coastal is the worst Quentin Tarantino movie ever made. Because for some odd reason, the plot is all screwy, and you get to the ending and you go, how the hell did we get here? Because you know what you had at the beginning, and you're like, how did we get to the end, and what the hell is this plot? That's the Coastal every year. Every year. Worst Tarantino.
I really looked at the ACC the other day. I'm like, I think with Jerkovich and Zay Flowers, like Boston College might be like second or third, and they shouldn't be.
Phil Jerkovic.
Yeah, he can play.
Pittsburgh kid.
Uh-huh.
Phil Jerkovic's a Pittsburgh kid. He's a guy that can ball. So if there's,
there's
a reason why I'm paying attention.
That's why I think they could be second or third.
Yeah, he's at minimum right now a second round pick.
I think he's going to get picked. Yeah,
he can work his way into the first round if he has that strong of a season. If he puts together good tape, he can work his way to the first round. He's that good.
All right, I kept you here too long already, so
yeah, I'm gonna wrap messages that the baby's getting restless. So
yeah, I'm gonna wrap up here. Make sure to follow Josh Taylor on Twitter. He is Josh Taylor HT. Of course, thanks to Courtney. Didn't say a lot today, but thank you, Courtney, for running this StreamYard account. She does what she does.
Courtney is the greatest.
Yeah,
no problem.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for listening to That's Some Cheese, part of the Vendetta Sports Podcast Network. Make sure to follow me, of course, Trey Dalbert. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube, and we'll see you next time.